Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This video is going to be focused on showing you how to make this dress, and I've decided to make this video in different parts. So in this video I'm going to be starting with the drafting of the pattern for this dress. This is a corset gown with a yoke, so with the Queen Anne yoke, and I'm just going to go straight into the details of making this dress. So you're welcome once again to my channel. My name is Ini. If it's your first time seeing me, subscribe to the channel, like this video, because I put out sewing content, very useful sewing content for free on this channel. So people, this right here on this table is a basic bodice pattern, and I'm very sure if you're trying to make this dress, you should know how to draft a basic bodice pattern. So I made it incomplete for a reason, because I'm going to be modifying it and changing this to a more complicated pattern. And guys, on this channel I have taken my time to explain how to do these things I'm about to do, so I won't be taking more time to explain in this video, so the video is not too long. Okay, so now I'm just going to introduce the underbust line, because we don't use the underbust line in a basic bodice pattern. So now just mark the underbust line to now convert this pattern to a more complicated one. Like this contoured pattern is the one I'm going to be using for this corset, and I have a video on this channel on how to do this. So guys, after doing this, I'm just trying to label the lines so that you can easily follow up. And another thing I did is that I added like 1.5 inches to the usual half cut line. So the shoulder to waist of this particular person I'm working with is usually 16 to 16.5 inches, but I decided to make use of 18 inches because I'm doing the contemporary kind of corset where you just add to the half cut. I don't need to do the imbues because I have a design going around in front. So with that being said, I'm just going to take the under bust darts, and to take that you just need to divide your bust length by 6, and I'm going to share that across on both sides of this lines, after which I'm going to go ahead to connect it back to the bust point like this. And from the under bust point, I'm just going to connect it back to the original darts that we had initially on this paper. Very simple, and by doing that we've gotten our darts for the cups. So now what I need to do is to take note of the neckline of this dress and how much I would like to expose on this corset. So in order to do this effectively and not do something that you regret later, the first thing you have to do is to take the difference between the bust and the under bust. In this case, I had 3 inches, and I marked that 3 inches above the bust point. This is going to guide you on creating your neckline so that you are not exposing the body more than you would want to. So from that point now, on the center line, I went down by 1 inch, and that will be the point where the curve comes in. So once I've identified this point, I'm going to go ahead now and connect the points I've made to create the neckline. I realized that the ruler was not giving me what I wanted, so I decided to make a freehand sketch. And after I got what I wanted, I just made use of the ruler to reinforce the lines I had made. I'll simply take note of that point because I'll be making use of it to draft the Queen Anne neckline after I've closed the darts above. Now, just to re-emphasize on what I was talking about, you can see that as this tape progresses, you see that the body's exposure reduces. So from that side, you can see we have 3.5, which is more than enough to cover the boobs, and as it comes down, you see that the body gets more exposed a little bit. So make sure you are doing this so you don't do something you get to regret, or you do an overexposed dress or an underexposed dress, depending on what your client wants. So at the center point, I marked about 0.3 inches inward. This is to create the bust bridge at the center. After which, I went down to the under bust line to get my point where I'll be connecting the cups. I went up by about 0.3 inches. That's a little bit above a quarter of an inch. I marked that point, and that was how I used that point to create my cups. So I connected from that bust bridge point down to that mark I made. Okay, so before I did that, I decided to go in again by the mark I made by another 0.3 inches so that I will not have to add when I am cutting on my fabric. So I decided to connect now to that point because I made room for the allowance that will be used to join the cup back to the body. So with that said, one part of the cup is already formed. To form the other part of the cup, you need to take note of the mark you have here. That's these 2 points, between those 2 points, and just take the midpoint there. And once you've taken that point, all you need to do is connect it back to the other point to get the second part of the cup. It's really that simple. So whenever you have plans to cut off papers at the armhole area, it's just important to replace a little bit. Like now I went up by 1/2 inch before connecting it back to the bodice point. And so with all this done, our bra cup is actually ready, and it's so simple. So I made use of a 1 and 2 cup. That's a cup with just 2 parts. But in case you would like to make yours a 3-part cup corset, all you need to do is to come down to this area and decide how you'd want the top part of the cup to be, while the remaining 2 parts under remain the 2 and 3. I really hope you understand this. So just create a partition at the top like this, a big partition at the top like this, that will create the top part with the armhole, and just label it. So like I said, I didn't go for this one because I'm so used to 3-part cup. I just felt like doing something different. I decided to go with just 1 and 2. That's 2 parts cupped corset. I hope you understand what I mean. And the part that is shaded simply implies that that part is going to go off when I am cutting. So when you create patterns like this, sometimes you have some parts that might be longer than the other part. So to avoid this, all you need to do is to place your tape at the end of the point where you'll be connecting to the next dart leg you can see. And in this point, at this point, you can see that I had 4 inches, but if you look at the other part, you see that it wasn't up to 4 inches. All you need to do is to make sure these parts match up, or else you have a tough time joining them. That's when you join, you now see that one part is longer than the other. So now I just smoothen this up, and this is now the new point where I'll be cutting off this part. You see it when I'm cutting anyways. So with that said, I just put the body measurements on this paper and added enough sewing allowance. So don't forget to replace your darts, and after replacing your darts, you add sewing allowance, enough of it. You can add 2 inches, you can add 2.5 inches, just what works for you. So once I was done with this process, I just went ahead to draft the back part of this dress. So the back part of this dress requires that I extend the new armhole line. Of course, if you watch the other video where I showed the drafting, you're going to understand what I mean by this. So I took note of the biggest points so that I can do the continuous drafting method. Please watch that video and you're going to understand everything I'm talking about in this video. So once I was done, I drafted the back part of this dress, and I went ahead to create the darts and everything it involves. So if you don't understand, like I said, please make sure you see the other video and you'd perfectly understand this. So for the back part, we're going to have something like a yoke behind, something like this that will have a button. So all I need to do is to take the normal 1 inch down and just put the place where we're going to have the buttons. So moving on, for the lacing bar area where we're going to have the eyelets, at the top part, I'm going to put about 2 inches inwards, and then for the lower part, I'll make it less by about maybe 1/2 inch or 0.75 inches. So I'll mark like 1.5 inches at the bottom, so that by the time I connect it and we've laced up the dress, we'll have an illusion of a V. Something that looks lower, closed on the under, and then more open at the top part. Okay, so I'll also decide where I want the yoke to start from, and then I'm going to connect it back to the point where we'll have the buttons. Another thing you want to make sure you're doing is match up the armhole point, so that when you're joining, you don't have issues. Also, I decided to cover up the back a little bit more. I did not make use of where the armhole is, so I just took it up a little bit more, and then I extended the eyelet point. So from the second dart leg, I decided to make the curve for the back yoke, and this depends on how open you want your back to be. In fact, after doing this, I realized that it would have been a little bit too open, so I decided to make some adjustments to it. So this was me adding about 0.75 inches for an allowance, so that I can use it to attach the skirt part of this dress. So this is the point where I came to adjust and readjust the opening of the back. So like I said, do this based on your own preference and how much skin you're willing to expose. So I cleaned up the other line because I now have the new point where I would like to cut off. So with all this done, I went ahead to start cutting out this pattern, and I started with the allowance point. Then I cut out the side piece for the front. Then of course you have to pay attention to this point. I made this part to be straight because that is the bust bridge, the point between the two cups, and I started cutting out. So just pay attention to the cutting of this part because it's very important, and I made sure to record it so that you don't make a mistake while cutting. So after cutting out the yoke part, I now joined the pieces up together and I created the shoulder slant just to complete the pattern. So I just taped them up together side by side. Please don't make the mistake of placing them over the other because you're going to shorten the measurements. I brought it close so that you can see what this looks like. So after doing that, I now drew out the queen and neckline, how I would want it to look. So from that point where I'll be having my line on the bra cup, I just created a slant to meet the normal neckline so that by the time I join at that line, I'll have something that looks like this. So by doing this, the new pattern there is the new pattern I'll be using to cut out the yoke. I really hope you understand this. If you don't understand, you can just rewatch this video and you definitely understand it with time. So the bra cup is going to complete the armhole, as you can see, like this. Can you see? And then the remaining part of the corset body is going to complete everything. So with time, when I sew this up, you're going to see everything and you understand it. So please subscribe to this channel. Just turn on your notification bell. You know that one that says all, turn it on so that you'll be the first to get notified when I upload the video. So this was me trying to create an illusion of the eyelets and how they will be positioned at the back. So I had to make this fast forwarded so that I can save time. So make sure you're looking at the part where I'm cutting and the part where I am not cutting. I also cut out the darts at the back and I glued the piece together to make one because that other piece was too small to work with. So I made sure I taped them side by side just like I showed you on the previous joining. And after I was done doing that, I cut out the yoke and cut out the darts in between. So one thing I did was to extend that part by about 1/2 inch for the allowance where I'm going to be overlapping the buttons. So don't forget to do this, especially when your fabric does not stretch. So I cut out the fabric, I cut out the darts in between there, and I'll be repeating the same process of putting them together. Of course, this is going to be cut on a net, so there's no need for any darts at all. So I had to close up that dart. I smoothed out this part so that I can get that arc in a perfect shape. I also took note of that point there because that's where I'll be joining it back to the body of the corsets. So once you've drafted your patterns correctly, it actually gives you an idea of what to expect when you are sewing. So you need to take this process very seriously. So one more thing I did was to take note of the amount I had lost when I cut out the space for the eyelets. So this is going to help me when I'm joining the fabric, the front to the back. This is just my own personal style. I don't know about what works for you, but this was what I was taught at my fashion academy. So at the end of the day, all my pattern pieces were ready to be cut on fabric. And in order to cut on my fabric, I put an interface, a cotton stay on the fabric, the main fabric and the lining fabric. Then I cut on them. So I cut exactly what I cut out from the pattern because I already added all my allowances, apart from the bra cups where I added 1/2 inch all round, apart from the armhole area because I already added that when I was drafting. If you observed just now, you would have seen that I made a notch. So anywhere you have a line on your pattern, it's very important to make that notch on the cup so that when you're joining, you're sure that you are matching up bust point to bust point, and that's going to help you to avoid joining wrong pieces together. So I made use of this chantilly net to cut out the yoke pieces, and that's basically all about the cutting of this fabric. Cutting of those patterns. So join me in the next video where I'm going to be sharing with you how to actually stitch up these pieces. subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. It takes a lot of effort to do a long voiceover like this. Thank you very much, and follow me on Instagram. Make a request for any video you'd like to see on this channel, and I'll be so glad to help you. See you in my next video, guys. Bye.